Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Kestler again from Lorain County Community College with another COVID video. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about a few of the things we've gone over. Today, I'd like to cover a little bit more about flattening the curve and how it is a real thing and how it really works. I'm also going to talk a little bit about reinfection and about mutation because that subject came up today on Meet the Press when Dr. Fauci was being interviewed, and that seems to be an interest that people have. All right. First of all, let me go to the flattening the curve story. Flattening the curve is a real thing, and so you can see that business. It looks very theoretical. There's no numbers on it, but I want to show you that there is real data. And the real data comes from the real big pandemic. This pandemic is going to be pretty bad, but the mother of all pandemics, the worst pandemic of all time is influenza 1918. Influenza 1918 is a really big deal. One time I sent a group of students into a cemetery with a pad and I told them to tick off the number of people who died in 1916, 1917, 1918, 1919, and 1920. And you could see that turned into a real bell-shaped curve with a very steep peak on 1918. So that was a really big deal. And we have some information about that. You can see from this paper, and it was written in 2007 by Professor Hatchett et al. And you can see that there's two different peaks here. One is in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia, the first case in Philadelphia occurred on September 17th, and social distancing protocols were not enacted until October 3rd. The story in St. Louis was much different. Social distancing protocols were enacted 2 days after the first case. So you can see the effect was a much bigger blunting, and we're talking about number of deaths here. This is about number of deaths, and the number of deaths were much more were much better in the case of the St. Louis epidemic than there was in the case of the Philadelphia epidemic. The next topic I want to talk about is the subject of reinfection. One of my colleagues, and I have to give a quick shout out to all the people who are working behind the scenes in these videos. There are my Microprof Learning Network staff we have a number of microbiologists at the college working with me who are extraordinary, and I just want to give them a quick shout out. They do a lot of things. They are putting together all sorts of things like activities, virtual things that people can do at home with their kids, virtual museum tours, all kinds of great enriching activities that people can do, and I will commend them all. But I got this paper from one of my colleagues, and this paper is about reinfection. And this was an actual study done in rhesus monkeys, and it does not seem to be possible that this virus gets reinfected into the same individual. Now, in the short term, that may be very different in the long term, but that is not something we're going to talk about today. We can get to that later. Also, the evidence that we have coming out of places like China, where they have the best amount of data available, seem to indicate that that is not the case. The last thing I want to talk about in this video was something that came out of Dr. Fauci's interview today on Meet the Press. And the question was, the media is always talking about viruses that mutate into something more severe. Will it become more severe with mutation? And I have to tell you, the evidence is against that. Most of the evidence that we have to date is that the evolution goes the opposite direction. That evolution goes from pathogenicity to non-pathogenicity. I always tell my students that pathogenicity is a consequence of newness. When a new virus gets into a new population, like COVID-19, which has just gotten into the population late in 2019, there are some problems that exist for a while. And I was reminded of a very, very old paper that I read a long time ago, and a very old concept. There was a adaptation that occurred in Australia. Myxoma virus was introduced into the population, and that myxoma virus caused what you see on the right-hand side of this picture, and that is rabbits do what rabbits do. And what happened was, what we saw from all of this is that on this picture here that you can see, there is a evolution of virus from pathogenic to non-pathogenic virus, and a evolution of rabbits starts out there. Many are susceptible, but the surviving rabbits reproduce. And I know this slide shows only one rabbit less susceptible. There obviously needs to be two. Takes two rabbits to make more. And as you can see, that the rabbits are also becoming more and more resistant. This is a very famous case. This is the myxoma population. European jackrabbits invaded Australia and took over, and they were nearly eliminated, and then they reemerged resistant. The last thing I want to talk about is just be good to each other. And I'm reminded of this quote from Mr. Rogers. And one of the things that he says is look for the helpers. I have one piece of advice for all of you is be the helper. And remember to be good to each other, and may you persist like a lentivirus.